Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you. It is Sunday, June 2nd, and we are going to be doing part one of our NBA Finals preview. Expected to have this pod out a little bit earlier, but frankly, both of the conference final series flew by. So, of course, part one, we are going to be focusing on everything from the Celtics fan perspective, as you can tell by the title of the video. I have my guy, RJ Rosazza. RJ, how are we doing today, man?
Hey, Nick, thanks for having me on again. It's been a long time. I'm going to have to shake off the rust early on here, but I think this is actually the first time that I've come on with good news where the Celtics are actually in a good situations as we have a NBA Finals to look forward to on Thursday. I think the other two times they were coming off a bad overtime loss to the Cavs, or Grant Williams missed a couple of big free throws, and then usually I'm Dr. Doom, but maybe you're going to get Mr. Brightside today. We'll see.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that side of you, man. I'm fired up. Of course, we have the NBA Finals matchup on our hands, but it's been too long. I mean, like we said, the last time I had you on, I think, was after the Celtics, almost came back from Miami, and then, of course, ended up choking in Game 7. A lot of that due to Tatum's injury, but we don't need to get into that right now because, frankly, again, what I want to do for the next couple podcasts here is today, obviously, we're going to have you on. We can kind of recap the conference finals, too, at the top of the episode, going through exactly how everything with Indiana played out. And then tomorrow, I'm going to have my guy, Brian Pope, on. He is a lifelong Dallas Mavericks fan, so he can give us a finals preview from the Mavericks fans' perspective. But let's start off with our C's, man. I'm obviously fired up to be here. The Celtics are officially 4 wins away from Banner 18. But before we can get into the matchup, the upcoming matchup that is with the Dallas Mavericks, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Indiana series because, again, it of course was a sweep. The Celtics were able to take care of business against Indiana in 4 games. But really, 3 of the 4 games came down to the wire. And so when you were watching that series against Indiana, I know it was a while ago at this point. We were basically a week since any action. But what was the biggest thing that stood out to you in that Celtics victory over Indiana?
I think it was more about my positive feelings coming out of the series about the Pacers than the Celtics. I mean, like you said, came down to the wire 3 out of the 4 games. I think they showed tremendous amount of heart, and I just think it came down to the Celtics' experience, especially in crunch time in a big playoff game. That's why they kind of came back. And those last 2 games in Indiana where the Celtics are kind of getting killed, but you still knew that there was a chance they were going to come back. My other thing with Indiana, I think kind of a high scoring team that you think they're maybe kind of soft. They didn't come off to me like they were very soft. Anytime there was any type of conflict, you had Miles Turner going after Jaylen Brown. The narrative about them too was they also made it that far, maybe because of the injuries to Milwaukee. So I just think that you have to give them a decent amount of credit for getting to where they got to, despite those injuries.
100%. And we'll touch upon this in a second because I think a lot of people were frustrated with how many games came down to the wire. But if you're just kind of watching as trying to be as unbiased as possible, the shot making from Indiana was pretty insane that entire series. I felt kind of like you, it was kind of less about the Celtics defense. I obviously wasn't super encouraged with the team defense, but looking at the shots that they were forced to make, and especially Andrew Nembhard, the way he stepped up without Halliburton in games 3 and 4, but I don't know, man. It felt like the defense was pretty solid. They were just on another level. And that's I haven't watched a ton of Indiana, but what I have seen of them is Carlisle has them playing with such confidence on offense. Nesmith is a totally different dude than the guy that we had on the Celtics.
Big time.
It's just a confidence. Every single player on that team is looking to score, looking to attack the basket whenever they touch the ball. We obviously know they play with a better pace than anybody else in the NBA. So I think that you kind of saw that playing out. But for me, I think, and you can let me know if you agree with this, for me it was the ability, from the Celtics fan perspective, for them to win close games. I know it was a banged-up Indiana team, but did they kind of show you anything with their ability to close out games 1, 3, and 4?
Well, yeah, I think, and I know we're going to talk about the injury situation and hey, at the end of the day, you can only beat who gets put in front of you. And I think the fact that they went through the fire, the first 2 games, I came away after game 2, I was not feeling good about them. I'm I think they're going to lose to whoever they face next round because, again, here we are. They're almost giving games away at home again. But then it was when they went to game 3 and game 4 and the way that they played in crunch time, and then you kind of know what Indiana is and that they're not just some slouch and that they still pull these games out, made me feel way better about them, especially the way that they pulled these games out at the end when they're down, 20 points, 15 points, and they D up, and your big players make big plays.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think for me anyway, and you can let me know if you agree, like, my biggest concern with the Celtics heading into the playoffs, and is kind of what it's been the past 3 years with this team, is like, despite how great they are, it seems like a lot of their wins come from them just beating the crap out of teams out the gate, right? They get up by a team like 15, 20 points in the first quarter, and then they put the car in neutral, and they just, they don't look back, right? And they just end up winning a lot of their games like that. But then you still have the question hanging over the team is like, how are they going to finish close games, especially in the playoffs? And while it would have felt a lot better if they were winning close games against like a healthy Milwaukee or like a healthy Philly or whoever people consider the top teams in the East are, like, They faced the Pacers, and they were in 3 really close games in which they were down 5, even 8 points with like 2 minutes left in game 3, and they found a way to win. So for me, they did answer a lot of questions, even though it was against a banged up Indiana team.
Can we jump into a little more like the narrative about like them playing like teams that are hurt? And
Please
like,
do.
I feel like the public, and like, you know me, like I can be very negative about the Celtics, but like this now public perspective on it that like every series it's like, oh well, this guy got hurt, like, for one, the Celtics didn't have Porzingis, and I mean, I don't know, I think even if those teams are healthy, the Celtics win regardless. So like, and the whole Miami series, like that, they're like, oh well, the Heat didn't have Butler. Well, I mean, that's what you get if you're a team like the Miami Heat are, that don't take the regular season serious, and you get drawn as a 7-8, whatever the play-in and stuff. You get what you deserve when then a guy gets hurt in the first round and you have to play a juggernaut like the Celtics. So you can only beat who gets put in front of you, and that's what they've done. So like to try to discredit them, especially when they're a 1 seed, they're not a 4 or a 5 seed. Like, they're beating teams they should beat and probably would have beaten regardless of the injuries. So it's gotten way, and like it's made me take this old positive stance about them and kind of come to their defense, which I don't like to do, but it's just gotten so out of control, especially with all this time off since Monday, where that's been the narrative.
Couldn't agree more. Like, we're in this perfect storm where like it's almost been hard to talk about the Celtics all year long because they were pegged as the team coming out of the East from day one. It's even before they acquired, Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis in the offseason. People expected the Celtics to be obviously contending for a championship, and then after those moves, they were pegged as the top seed all year long, and then they were the best team in basketball all year long. You get to this point in the Eastern Conference Finals where like you said, there's time off. It's kind of boring, like they're playing these injured teams, but the Celtics are 12-2. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And so when you have all this time off, and it is the more boring part of the bracket. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say, as a basketball fan, I have enjoyed watching the Eastern Conference road more than the Western Conference. The Western Conference has been way more exciting. So people just need shit to talk about with this team. And so you just kind of end up like trying to find holes and poke holes in the Celtics run, because what else are you really going to say? Hey, the better team won? Like, that's boring. That doesn't get people to listen.
Yeah, because like, what are you going to talk? Like you said, what are you going to talk about? Like, they handled business like they should have. So like, we got to talk about something. So let's take the negative perspective that they're playing down to their opponent, which, yes, they probably are. And do the Celtics play with their food probably a little too much, especially early on in these games? That's just why they fall behind. But like you said, like the way that they came through in crunch time makes me like, at the end of the day, yes, these teams they played weren't 100% healthy, but they still got that experience of being in a playoff game, being down 15, being in, no matter who you're playing, these are crunch time games where you have big shots, big moments, which makes me feel better about going into next series.
I don't even like giving this storyline some like consideration. Let's just play it out, because what I've been saying all year long is I firmly believe that this is the deepest the NBA has ever been. Like, the talent on all 30 rosters from top to bottom is stronger than what it's ever been in league history, right? And so when you have rosters that deep and star players are missing, there's a lot of guys that are 8 through 10 on a roster that can step up if given the opportunity. And I felt like in every single series so far, yes, the Celtics, you could make the argument the best player on the opposing team missed time in every single series against the Celtics, right? Like, obviously Jimmy, obviously Donovan Mitchell, and then Tyrese Halliburton. But in every single one of those series, you had guys off the bench stepping up. And I'm not saying they delivered quite as good as star performances, but against Miami, I think it would have gone 5 either way. The only game that Miami won, they just shot the shit out of the ball in game 2. Like, even if you had Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier, you better hope they checked in and shot 50% from 3, because that was the only way they were beating Boston. Like, do you agree with that? Like, would you have said Celtics in 5 over Miami, even with Jimmy?
Yes, like in the whole injury thing too, it's like too bad, too sad. Like injuries happen, and like sometimes, like to go win a championship, sometimes you got to get a little bit of luck. Like it happens. So like I don't know. Like I said, the Miami thing irritates me. The Cleveland thing, and like really irritates me too, because we saw what the Cavs were last year. They got manhandled by the Knicks, and then this year they limped through a 7-game series with a young Orlando Magic team. Like this, they fired their coach. Like they're just not a very good team. So to say just because Mitchell missed 2 games, again, play through the injury. Like if it's that big of a deal, like I know that's not 100% fair to say, but it is the playoffs. Like when you see a guy on the bench like standing up too, and he's like rooting on the guys, and it's a playoff game, and you're supposed to be one of the best players in the world. There's just a part of me that's just like, get on the court, dude. Like it's the playoffs. But like I said,
yeah,
I could be being very unfair because sometimes guys just can't get out there. But
exactly. But I agree with you. I mean, I think we had, especially with the Cleveland series, we had enough of a sample size. I mean, I was in the building for Game 2. I visited Connor in Boston and saw easily the worst Celtics performance of the entire playoffs so far. And Mitchell was awesome in that game. But he definitely doesn't change the fate of this team. And I feel more strongly about it with Indiana than any other matchup so far. Like, the Pacers were literally better without Tyrese Halliburton. If you think Tyrese Halliburton would have even extended the game a single series, I don't even know if you watched the games. Because Andrew Nembhard and the version of Andrew Nembhard that we got in games 3 and 4, he had 2 games that were better than any single Tyrese Halliburton performance the entire playoffs. Because Tyrese Halliburton gets hunted on defense like nobody's business. Like, I'm not saying Nembhard is, Marcus Smart out there, but he's pretty damn, like, he's at least capable. He's better than Tyrese Halliburton. And he stepped up and he played with confidence. Like, when the guy you're plugging into the lineup is playing with, I mean, I know he starts normally alongside Halliburton anyway, but still, like, he was kind of the primary, benefactor from no Tyrese Halliburton, and he was awesome. So, like, I have zero reservations that even if the injury luck was a little bit better for the Celtics opponents, even if they end up being 12-4 instead of 12-2, they're still sitting here in the finals, and that's that. That's my opinion, anyways.
No, yeah, and like let's be honest too, Halliburton kind of like limped through the second half of the season too. Like he wasn't what he was in the first half. He's got a broken shot, and when that guy's missing shots, he's missing shots bad. So
yes,
yeah.
It's just because that element of his game, like if he's not, I don't know, like people talk about the playmaking, and I understand the assist to turnover ratio on that guy is like bonkers, but like when you're really watching him play, it's like, okay, if he's not getting to the 3-point shot, it just seems like he's just kind of floating around out there. He's not cutting off the ball. Like if he doesn't go to the hoop enough to really, like, sometimes he will drive and kick, but he's not finishing at a high level. He's not shooting the mid-range at a high level. So I don't know, man. I can't stand Halliburton, so I really didn't feel bad about that. Like, if any Indiana fan thinks it would have gone differently, I just don't think we're watching the same series. But that's just me. But going back to that Indiana series, it was an awesome series from the perspective of Jaylen Brown, right? And he was actually recognized with getting the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. It's kind of funny that they give out an MVP for the conference finals, I must admit. But when Jaylen was the one nominated for that award, what was going through your head? Did you feel like he was deserving of that award?
So I went back, and like we said, they haven't played in a while. I went back and I looked at the numbers. The numbers are like not too different between the two, but obviously between Tatum and Brown. But like as a Celtics fan, I'm like, good, give it to Brown. If anything, it kind of, because at the end of the day, guys won't admit it, there is a dynamic, and you see the way that Brown is very aggressive when he shoots the ball. His volume's going up, and the fact that he's probably not overly pleased that he didn't make All NBA. I think that it just kind of, like I said, like even though these guys probably love each other, there is this kind of internal competition. Obviously, Tatum got the one a couple years ago, so as a fan, I kind of like that it kind of evens out, and that narrative kind of doesn't continue. But I think his big moment in Game 1 is probably what, and him coming up in crunch time a couple of times is probably what the determining factor was. Other than that, I thought they both had good series, and wasn't shocked either way that it went there.
Yeah, I loved it personally, a lot of for the reasons that you said. And to touch on your point, like, it just kind of felt like it evened it out, and it felt like it was a good moment for Jaylen Brown. Like, he was obviously very humble and supportive of, like, his teammates and whatever, but he also said, like, I was surprised I didn't win shit, was a quote from him, right?
Yeah.
And, like, and he definitely feels that way, right? Because of, Tyrese Halliburton made like third team All NBA. I'm obviously a bit biased, but I had Jaylen in that spot, and so that that was announced in the middle of that Indiana series for the record. So for him to get that recognition, but I also felt like he deserved it. Like, again, it's not worth totally going into the weeds on a series that was a sweep, but I just felt like, I know Tatum had like, basically better numbers across the board in terms of the counting stats. Like he had, basically double the rebounds and assists of Brown, but Brown shot a lot better from the field, and like you said, it was the big moments. It was the shot in game 1, even at the end of game 4, like the block that he had basically the block against Nembhard, got the rebound, and then he was the one that drove and kicked it out to Derek White, who hit the game-winning 3 that iced the series. Like, it did feel like he had a larger role down the stretch, and honestly, in game 3, he actually had a monster dunk over Pascal Siakam. It was in the midst of like a big run for the Celtics, and they were still down quite a bit in game 3. So as a Celtics fan, we probably didn't enjoy that poster as much as like we could have. But like, I just watched that back earlier today. Like, that was nuts. And so and Tatum kind of went the other way, right? Like, he had like an insane numbers in game 1, but like, I do kind of understand, like, he had a couple really bad turnovers in game 1. Like, he had a couple moments where it just felt like Brown was a little bit better down the stretch. And I do feel like on the defensive end, I'd give the nod to Brown. So I felt like it was deserved, and I was also happy as a Celtics fan to see Jalen get that recognition.
I will say about Brown's performance, I think it was game 1 or game 2. Well, I know game 1, he started off hot, and then he kept forcing up shots that were really bad in the second half. And then like I said, I can't remember if it was game 1 or game 2, but it was one of the games Siakam was going off. He was playing Brown lazy, horrible defense in the first half, where it looked like Missoula said something to him coming off the court. So like, they both had their great and bad moments that series, which that's you see that 3 out of the 4 games came down to crunch time. A team that you're definitely better than, that's obviously going to happen.
Yeah, just to put a bow on this Indiana series, like, I think what I was happy about is I do think, like, our top 5 guys that were out there, like, I know we've been mostly talking about Tatum and Brown, but we covered it. Like, they had great series, but, like, Drew Holiday was fantastic as well. The steal he got in game 3 to ice the game, like, he was lights out. Like, the way he was, like, posting up bigger guys, like, he took Obi Toppin to the basket and got, like, an and one, like a dude significantly taller than him, to basically cap off a run at the end of game 4. Like, he was so good down the stretch. White was fantastic. And even Al, like, I know he got hunted a bit defensively, but for him to be playing 35 minutes a game when he's been playing like 20 all year long, and he's still, like, at least offensively was really solid. Shot 40% from 3. I'm happy with what I saw. They answered the questions about the late game, and I thought our top 5 looked really good.
I just want to say something about Drew Holiday. I'm happy you brought him up, because he's everything that the Celtics fanboys thought Marcus Smart was. And like, he's a real championship caliber player. He's a real big time player. Yeah, we don't have to get too much into Marcus Smart, but I have something else to say about that later on.
He was brought in to kind of fill that role, obviously, and he's been fantastic. And there's been, like, people out there, like a lot of Bucks fans, that would shit on Drew Holiday for his, like, at least his numbers on the offensive end of the court, like taking a significant dip in the playoffs. But I just felt like usually that just came down to Milwaukee asking him to do too much. Like, you're right. If he's your primary ball handler on offense, like, you're probably not going to be that great of an offense unless you have a truly special player, which he happened to have next to him in Milwaukee, and Giannis, of course. But, like, they were just asking him to do too much on offense, and now he's in this perfect role where he's hitting shots, and anything he gives offensively is kind of gravy when he plays the defense that he does. And he just doesn't make those mistakes that I feel like Marcus made. Like, Marcus was just a louder player. He had more flashy plays. He had louder plays on both ends of the court where it was like, wow. But then he would also have, like, the nightmare moments a lot more frequently than Drew Holiday. So I'm sure you would probably agree with that as well.
It's just about knowing your role, and Smart didn't, Holiday does, and that's why a big reason the Celtics are going to the NBA Finals.
Well, on that note, let's pivot to, of course, the NBA Finals here. You were pretty dialed in for the Western Conference Finals, but, like, before the series even started, like, as you were watching that, like, who did you want to win that series and why? What team do you felt like was a better matchup from the perspective of the Celtics?
So I would say Minnesota would probably be the better matchup, but just watching it, if I tried to put myself as a casual fan, I wanted Dallas for the theater of it, and the writers got this one right. My thing is, like, I try, now that I've been watching, just sports in general for so long, I try to not be a victim of the moment, and try to, like, how I was thinking about Minnesota after they beat Denver, where I'm like, you know what, man, everybody was, like, shitting all over Gobert and these guys, and, like, I sold Minnesota short a lot during the beginning of the postseason because, yes, I mean, do I think Karl Anthony Towns and Gobert are, like, losers? I do. But when you have Anthony Edwards, I think, like, the team is taking, like, the shape of his DNA more than the other two. And that's why 100%. I was selling them short, because, like, there was times in that Phoenix series, like, we don't need to go too far back, but I'm like, Phoenix is going to get a couple here. Like, they're not going to get swept. But Edwards was out there trying to kill these guys. And I don't know. I think they're going to be and then you have this series against Dallas where, I mean, I almost feel bad even talking about Karl Anthony Towns because, like, he might be clinically, like, have something wrong with his brain because some of these fouls, you have the game where he Another thing is, too, where he's pulling up, shooting threes, and every time he went to the basket, he got what he wanted. If he missed, at least it was very close to going in the basket. And then you have fouling Luka at half court. You have, I think it was Derrick Jones. He jumped into. He's just a dumb player, and it's going to be interesting going forward with that team, who they are. If is this Edwards' team, and it is Edwards' team, but it's just the disgusting loser quality of Karl-Anthony Towns and Gobert going to swallow that team up. And if they have to make a move, there's already rumors going around with Cat.
I think you hit it right on the head. It was really hard to evaluate that Minnesota-Dallas series going in, because I think that Minnesota did everyone a favor. I think they did Dallas a favor. I think they did the Celtics a favor by knocking off potentially the best team in the league in Denver. I know it sounds a little dumb, and I'm very grateful for the Celtics to be in the spot that they're in, and I am going to 100% call them the best team if they're able to beat Dallas and win the championship. But that being said, I think we all know in the back of our minds, the NBA is a lot about matchups, and I think a Celtics-Denver matchup could be really difficult, and I definitely think a Dallas-Denver matchup could be really difficult. But the reality of the situation was Minnesota was very well equipped to beat Denver, and they were able to persevere and come back and win after losing three straight, which I never would have saw coming. So before the series, I actually really wanted Dallas to win, because I felt like if Minnesota is going to play at the level that they played defensively, I felt like they matched up defensively a lot better with the Celtics than Dallas did. But obviously, as the series is going on, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I would rather see Minnesota, because Luka looks like the best player in the world and is absolutely terrifying to face off against. So it is pretty interesting as we kind of prepare for this finals matchup. But I think the biggest question mark as Celtics fans, as we're looking at this series, is what are we going to get from Kristaps Porzingis? So I know that we're getting kind of mixed reports on him, and I don't think you've been in the Celtics locker room any time recently, but I still want to ask you, what is your confidence level in Kristaps as we head into this series against Dallas?
Right, I mean, skill wise, and do I think he'll be effective if he plays? Yes. If we're talking health, if you put a gun to my head, do I think he's going to play on Thursday? I do. I mean, it could be obviously maybe 20, 25 minutes. He's limited, but then I'm like, even if he comes back and he's healthy on Thursday, is he just going to get hurt again? And this is a big series for him. I don't really have a guy I can hate on anymore on the Celtics for the most part, but he's kind of taken that spot for me, because the Celtics have been so careful with him all year. He missed 30 games, 25, something like that. And still, he gets hurt game 4 against Miami, I believe,
yep,
and hasn't even come close. And maybe they're being safe with him. Still, again, they're being safe with him. He better be able to get his ass out there on Thursday and be productive, because if he's not, in the Celtics, whether they win or lose this series, I think they have to question whether, they might not be able to move on from him, but I'm just saying they have a lot of questions whether they can trust this guy as a piece going forward that's going to help them win a championship, as will other teams that are going to compete for a championship.
I think we're in the same spot. I do fully expect Kristaps to play, but it is a bit unnerving, right? It's how much they're not giving us much information in terms of updates on his health and everything like that, and they could be being intentionally vague, because none of those series that the Celtics have played in so far was even close. So I'm glad that they didn't bring him back. I don't think that would have made any sense to bring him back against Indiana, especially with them taking a 2-0 series lead and everything like that. But it's a bit unnerving, because is there just some gamesmanship there where they're being intentionally vague, or do they know exactly what's going on and he's going to play? So I do expect him to play. Are you nervous at all? Again, because I do think we're aligned in expecting him to be out there on Thursday. Are you nervous about him affecting the chemistry of the team in any capacity? I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
No, because I think they probably are used to him being in and out of the lineup all season. But maybe be more concerned about just him, as a player, I guess. Maybe if he's kind of rusty. But I think they'll be fine. I think he'll get his looks and he'll make his looks. I just, like I said, it's his health that concerns me. This is just an ongoing thing with him, and if the Celtics keep him past this year into the future, this is just something that's going to be an ongoing conversation forever, because he cannot stay healthy.
I don't think Mavericks fans are losing sleep over Kristaps' injury health potentially being the thing that makes or breaks their title chances. It's kind of poetic.
Another great storyline. Yep.
Yep, of course. Kristaps' return to Dallas as well. So yeah, I'm not worried about the chemistry at all. I'm sure people are going to bring that up this week, and frankly, I could just care less. Again, like you said, there was a lot of time of him in and out of the lineup, and I think we all saw how much of a difference maker he really is for that team. Al the way he's been hunted, like I expect them to treat Kristaps the same, but I just don't know if teams are going to have the same success because Kristaps doesn't exactly have lightning fast feet either, but like that 7'3" frame of his like just makes up so much. Like the length that he has and his ability to contest shots from like, 6-7 feet away, like that's just something that Al doesn't really compete with. So I really think that Kristaps has been the X factor for this team all year and what separates the Celtics from being like really good to being a literal great team. I think Kristaps is that different maker. So I'm not worried about plugging him back in, but like you said, it's just going to come down to health. So I want to
obviously we're going to talk about like our fears heading into this series, like, and I think you kind of just touched on it. Like, how do you think, because you know the game better than I do, like X's and O's wise, how do you think they're going to try to target Horford or Porzingis? Like, obviously you have Lively, who seems like he's healthy. I know he's almost been killed the last 2 games by Towns, and then you have Gafford. How do you think that they're going to target him? Do you think it's going to be this alley-oop game they play, and Horford's obviously a little undersized for a center, or do you think it's going to be dragging them out and trying to guard one of, Kyrie or Luka? I was just curious of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the hope of Dallas is like the Celtics, their philosophy the past couple of years and what's made them so good is like they've really prided themselves on having 5 defenders that they feel like they can switch with confidence, and especially like the younger versions of Al Horford was really great on that, now not as much. So knowing that the Celtics are so willing to switch, maybe more willing to switch than almost any other team, there's really only one matchup as a Celtics fan that ever scares you, and that's going to be Kristaps or Al, because it's certainly not going to be the other 4 guys. But also just knowing that Dallas is like probably the best isolation team in the NBA with what they can do with Luka and Kyrie. So it's just going to be as simple as like, hey, how often are the Mavericks able to get the matchup that they want on the perimeter? Because the lobs and everything like that, like that's just going to happen with really great penetration. Eventually you're going to give some of those up, and it's going to become more of a decision, or like, are you willing to live with a lob from Gafford or Lively, or are you going to make PJ Washington and Derek Jones beat you on corner threes? I'd probably prefer the latter, but if those guys are hitting their threes, like you're kind of fucked either way. Like, let's be real. There's a reason why Dallas is here. They're a phenomenal offensive team. So I just think it's going to be, my fear from the Celtics point of view is just like, is Mazzulla going to be able to scheme up a way to prevent that matchup where Porzingis or Al are guarding on the perimeter, or even in like the high post area? Are they able to prevent that isolation matchup as much as possible? Because if you're able to keep those plays, as like, it's going to happen a few times, but if you can keep it to like 5-10 plays or less, like I think you take that as a Celtics fan. It's kind of my look at it.
One of my concerns is like, it seems like the Celtics kind of like obviously live or die by the 3. Like, what if they have? I think the reason, obviously, they lost to Miami, you talked about Miami had a great shooting night, but also the Celtics couldn't make anything. Like, what if that happens 2 nights in a row? Like, do you think the Celtics will ever switch up the strategy and, like, attack the hoop? Because it doesn't seem like they're going to do that if they're missing their shots. So my concern is, like, what if that happens one of these first 2 games at home and you drop a game at home and Dallas takes care of business at home, and then all of a sudden they have home court advantage? I was just curious also what you maybe thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Celtics, like, they're never really, like, no team in the NBA at this point is going to go away from shooting a significant amount of threes, and I think the Celtics would be pretty naive to do that unless there's, like, an injury or something that happens that really affects their floor spacing, or they really, like, somebody's really in a slump. But the nice thing about it is, like, look, if we're talking about Celtics fans being concerned about hunting Porzingis and Al Horford, like, the Mavericks are the ones that still should be worried, because they have 2 guys in Luka and Kyrie who, like, make them guard. Like, you're never really going to tire those guys out. They're always going to have enough left in the tank to close a game. But, like, we can do that even better than they can. And I've been really confident, and kind of what I said about Drew Holiday, too. Like, we know White can score off pick and rolls and off isolation. But, like, even Holiday, man, like, that post-up game that he has is, like, legit. Now, he's probably not strong enough to post up Luka. But, like, Kyrie is going to be baby food for him with the things that he was doing to, like, he did that to Pascal. He did that to Obi Toppin on a few plays. Like, I'm not saying I want to go to a Drew Holiday post up 15 times a game, but like, shit, if he gets the matchup that he wants, like, I think the Celtics can expose that in the isolation game too. So I think, there's going to be some variance. It's going to come down to 3-point shooting in some capacity, but like, I am comfortable that if the Celtics have enough ways to beat Dallas, even if they do go cold. But as we know, like, if both teams are going to be taking a lot of threes, so sometimes you're not able to overcome that, even if you can go to a different type of offense. But I mean, what is your biggest fear, right? Like, when you're looking at the Dallas Mavericks matchup, like, what is the thing that, above all else, besides the health of Kristaps, scares you the most about facing that team in the finals?
It's the poetic justice of a motivated Kyrie that puts a dagger into the hearts of Celtics fans. And I think Kyrie's the most important player in this series. I think not to say he vanishes, but I think if he has a pretty bad series and Porzingis is healthy, I think the Celtics can handle business rather fast in this series. But I think if he continues to play how he does, then it's going to be a long series, and I think it'll probably go 7. And then, yeah, like, just kind of, like, talking about, like, him, obviously, like, there's so much emotion with, like, as a Celtics fan and with Kyrie and just everything. I think, honestly, the Celtics fans bring out the worst in him, and he seems like he's in a really good place right now. Like, and I also think he brings the worst out in Celtics fans. And, like, 100%. I know the narrative of, like, all these, you know, racist fans, I don't think it's that, but do I think there's fans that really like to ride that line at times? And I think Kyrie brings that out of those fans. So it's going to be, I'm interested to see if it's going to be as toxic as an environment that we think, or if Kyrie's going to be able to, because it has died down, I think, because, and I also, being completely honest, don't hate him as much as I did a few years ago, because it kind of just seems like he's just playing basketball. Like, he's not in headlines for anything else, and he's a fun player to watch. And I know I'm not a fanboy, so I'm sure the fanboys have more emotion in it. But I do wonder if it's kind of trickled down to the rest of the fan base. But even if it has, if everything is just going to come to boil come Thursday and the rest of this series.
It's a great storyline, right? Like, obviously it's kind of like the elephant in the room, and I'm sure ESPN and all the other major media sites are going to get a shitload of play from, like, reminding folks what happened. But I'd imagine anybody that is listening to this podcast right now, like, remembers, like, you know, why Celtics fans were so upset. It was, like, you know, a mix of his getting injured, and he was here 2 years, right? He got hurt. And then, of course, he didn't really show up for that round 1 series against the Bucks. And then there was that entire storyline the last series he was here of, like, hey, he's a free agent. It's coming up. Like, is he going to be here? Like, reporters are asking him nonstop. He does that weird, you know, press conference, whatever you want to call it. It was more of like an event for, like, season ticket holders where he tells a room full of Celtics fans he plans on re-signing and, like, hopes that they're going to retire his jersey someday. And the dude is out of there. And just for him to go and be butt buddies with Kevin Durant, like, when the whole storyline, like, just 3 years before was he wanted to trade out of Cleveland because it felt like he didn't want to be in the shadow of LeBron anymore. And, you know, for better or for worse, he was known as the best player on the Celtics at that point in time. Like, he had his own team on a historic franchise that has a history of winning. And, of course, again, that's kind of why we hate him so much, is he lied. I think that's why I hate him so much, right? Like, it was never the player thing. But I did want to get your thoughts, because you mentioned, like, you softened up on him a little bit. Like, you've come around on him.
Yeah,
like,
so, like,
how have you felt with him, like, getting his flowers, like this Kyrie resurgence the past couple weeks? What has that been like for you?
I don't know if it's because I've gotten older, because, like, I'm a father now and I'm more soft, but, like, a small part of me wants to be like, hey, let's have this 7-game series be a complete war. And I would love if he's out there and he's flipping off fans again and the Celtics fans are throwing water bottles at him. But let's bury the hatchet when the series is over and let's move on. Like I said, he's just playing basketball. So a small part of me wants to be like, hey, like, let's play this 7-game series and let's be done with it. And, like, this narrative can just stop, because it's the fanboy narrative too. They're losers, but yeah.
That's very interesting. I love that point. I do agree. Like, I've definitely softened up as well. Like, I've always, like, Kyrie's one of my favorite players in the entire league when we got him, right? Like, watching him play basketball, like, it's second to none. Like, he's more fun to watch than maybe anyone in the league besides Steph, in my opinion. Right? He's that good. And so I've definitely softened a bit too, but I also think the pendulum might have swung, like, a little too much, right? Like, I see people, like, and I'm in Dallas, right? So I'm surrounded by way more Mavericks fans and Mavericks content than you, and, like, obviously they have every right to love him here. Like, why wouldn't you? And they should, and whatever. But, like, I think it's just gone a little too far. Like, these random casual fans are like, oh, I'm so happy for this guy, and it's just like a picture of Kyrie, and it's like, oh, like, he's just been through so much. It's like, what has he been through? Like, he's just been a dick. He's been a dick for 5 years. Like, that's what happened. He was just a massive dick for 5 years. Like call it what it is. He didn't, like, he went to Brooklyn. He left the Celtics. He quit on the team, and he went to Brooklyn, where it's not like he had some shit team. He was partnered up with Kevin Durant and James Harden. Now, obviously, that never really aligned for them to, like, all play together, but a lot of that was Kyrie's fault. He didn't get the vaccine. He wasn't healthy for a lot of the time in Brooklyn. And then he goes to Dallas, and the first year he's there, they missed the playoffs. So and the entire career he's played with LeBron, Tatum, Durant, or Luka. Like, he's had an elite counterpart the entire time. So I just feel like people are, like, forgetting why we all dislike Kyrie. Like, yes, I am happy for him. I'm happy he's in a better spot. I'm happy we all just get to watch him play basketball. But let's not act like any of the reasons that he wasn't happy or wasn't in a good space were not self-induced. It was all his fault. So I just want to remind everybody of that real quick, because I think
there's been compilation videos too of like all, like I said, him flipping off the fans and stuff, and I'm like, maybe I actually should really still hate this guy and like have like this emotion to it. But like I said, like I just thought it was so funny when he was here, and I'm somebody, and like we're talking obviously 4 or 5 years ago, but I'm somebody that calls it out that hey, he doesn't like it here, he doesn't like you people, and then I have to hear from diehard Celtics fans that bleed green that are, oh no, he loves it here, he's a great guy, and then he spits in your face and he leaves. So there's a disgusting part of me that thinks it would be absolutely hysterical if Dallas wins this series. But at the end of the day, to my core, I am a Celtics fan, and we've seen them win one time in our life. 16 years ago. Our nuts hadn't dropped yet. Like we're men now. We probably both have very vague memory of them winning. So I am rooting for them, but there's a small part of me that would get off a little bit if Dallas wins this series.
Well, I will say, I mean, ever since the famous Lucky incident, right? I think that was in like a regular season game against the Nets where he like stomped on the mascot. Or actually, no, that might have happened in a playoff game. There's only been 2 times in Tatum's entire career we haven't gone to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that's been well publicized, and one of those was in 2021, in which we got crushed by the Nets in round 1. We lost in 5 games. We also didn't have Jaylen Brown that series.
Okay, I was going to say that was the series Brown was hurt.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
And that was the only series, like literally the only one where Harden, Durant, and Kyrie were healthy for all the games. And so, Kyrie played pretty well that series. I don't know if it was a regular season game or if it was in the end of that series where he stomped on the mascot, but the Celtics are 10-0 against Kyrie since then. 10-0 against Kyrie ever since, and whether he was wearing a Brooklyn uniform, obviously we swept Brooklyn 2 years ago in the playoffs. We've taken care of Dallas every single time we've played Dallas when Kyrie played anyways. So I am cautiously optimistic. Now, we obviously let Andrew Nembhard cook us a little bit last series, so that wasn't the most encouraging. That obviously Kyrie's on a different plane than Andrew Nembhard, and even though he was playing good ball, but like just with the guys that we can throw at him, right? Like Drew Holiday can step in at times, like Derek White can step in at times, Jaylen Brown can step in at times. I just feel like if there's any team that is well equipped to slowing down Kyrie, it's going to be us. But at the end of the day, good offense does beat good defense, so we'll have to see how that goes. I mean, just pivoting to the question that I asked you that I wanted to give my thoughts on as well was just like the biggest fear. Like the Kyrie storyline is fun, and I'm glad we dove into that. But for me, it just kind of comes down to Luka, right? Like I think most people, even Mavericks fans out there would probably admit that the Celtics are a more talented team, and believe the Celtics have been the best team all year long. But there is that factor of just having the best guy, and there is no doubt in anyone's mind on either side of things who the best guy in the series is, and it's Luka. He's gotten better every single year, or excuse me, he has gotten better every year, but he's also gotten better every single series of this postseason. Like the dude against the Clippers when he was limping around with the knee injury and whatever is completely different than the guy that just eviscerated the Timberwolves. So, what is your thoughts on facing off against a guy like Luka in this series?
So like you said, like everybody would agree that he's the best player in this series, and I think you're right. But if there's one guy that plays for the Celtics that should hear that and take it personally, it should be Jason Tatum. I mean, it's nobody even, like they say, who's better, Luka or Tatum? It seems like it's 100% Luka. I mean, if you're Tatum, why not use that to motivate yourself and lock his ass up and prove that you are one of the best players in the world, that you are a better player than he is? So I think that's also a storyline that's not getting talked about a lot too, is that these guys are, this might not be the first time these guys ever see each other in the finals. Like, this could be a long, drawn-out rivalry. I just think if you're Tatum, like this series will show a lot who Tatum is. Like, he didn't have a good finals against the Golden State Warriors a couple of years ago, so that's actually one of my concerns too. Is now can he rise to the occasion and outplay Luka? Because I do agree with you. A lot of times in these NBA series, whatever team has the best player wins. So yeah, I want to see Tatum rise to the occasion and kind of prove that they're way more equals, if not Tatum potentially better than Luka than people are saying.
It's a very interesting take.
I like guys that D up and don't occasionally have to go to the bench, which does happen with Luka. So, yeah.
In a 7-game series, I'm not going to sit here and I would never argue that Tatum's is better than Luka right now, but in a 7-game series, he's certainly on the level where he can outplay Luka for, 4 out of the 7 games, and then that's enough to win the series. Like, it's definitely possible. The nice thing about how the Celtics are set up, I don't think that's the only way that the Celtics win.
Agreed.
If it was, I would probably pick the Mavericks, right? Like, because I wouldn't necessarily bet that Tatum is just the best player in the series, but it's possible. I mean, I personally think that the Celtics are going to start off with Jaylen Brown on Luka. I could be wrong. That's just like my guess. There's going to be 4 guys that get a real shot at Luka during the series, and I think, look, it's almost like and you got to approach it like you would an NFL game, right? Like you can't give Patrick Mahomes the same look every time. He's gonna just even if you cover 2 is the right play to start the game, like he's hitting you down the seam like the next time to Kelsey, right? So like you have to mix it up, and so it could be a detriment if we're constantly like, okay, Drew, like your turn, Derek White, your turn, like. Because I don't think they're as defenders, like they're not getting a good opportunity to necessarily figure out Luka for what you can. But I think they're going to be a lot of guys that get the shot. But I think it starts with Jaylen Brown. I think he's going to be the guy that gets the nod on Luka, at least to start the series.
Yeah, like that's kind of my thing with Kyrie too. Like the Celtics have all these different guys that they can just throw at Luka, throw at Kyrie, and I don't like. Trust me, watching that Game 5 where Luka's pulling up from the logo and just drilling shots. Like, I love watching this guy play, and obviously he's very special, and there's a part of me that's like, what if like the Celtics just can't stop him? Like, that's a very real possibility. But yeah, like you said, they're gonna throw a bunch of different looks at him, and it'll be like, this is a big test for Luka too. Like I think he's kind of had easy getting up to this point. I think he was playing with food with Minnesota, and obviously they're supposed to be a great defensive team. They couldn't hang with him, so it's going to be, talk about the Celtics defense, and they have all these guys, like, well, let's see if they can they're never going to shut him down. But I mean, there was a game against Minnesota where I think he might have ended up getting to his total. It was over of like 28-29, but he did it kind of that garbage time game in Game 4. So it'll be interesting to see if the Celtics can pull a couple of games like that out of him.
Yeah, I think for this series, like the reality of it, like I'd love for the Celtics to do what they've done a lot of times in the regular season, have like at least one game in the series where they just like come out the gates firing. Because Jason Kidd, I swear to God, like if you're gonna poke holes, and you can poke a lot of holes in Jason Kidd, he's been a lot better this season, especially during this postseason run. I feel like there's been a lot of games where he just like doesn't have his team up to play, and for whether it was Ime or Mazzulla, like the Celtics the last couple of years they've been ready to go from tip off in these games. So if the Celtics can like get 1, maybe even 2 wins like that, where they just, get up early and they just don't look back, which is really hard to do, that'd be great. But my fear is just like what it's been all season, even after the Indiana series. Like, yes, we were able to come back late and win some close games against the Pacers, but like with the Mavericks having not 1, but maybe even 2 guys, depending on the game, that could be the best players on the court and certainly the best shot creators on the court to close games, like it's just going to come down to how the Celtics execute down the stretch. And it's really scary to go up against Dallas in that situation. So like Luka and then the late game execution is my biggest fear. But one of the final questions I have for you, because we've touched upon this a little bit with the Mavericks' road to the playoffs, right? Like they've had a pretty impressive run. Like nobody's trying to poke holes in who the Mavericks have played like they're doing the Celtics, right? Like they went through the Clippers, albeit without Kawhi, for a couple of those games. Then they go through the number 1 seed in Oklahoma City, and then they beat the Timberwolves, who are red hot and just disposed of Denver. You're looking at the Mavericks, and you're looking at you would say they're a hotter team right now. Like their road, what they've done has been more impressive. And then you look at the Celtics, we've covered ad nauseum the injuries they've faced and the teams they've gone up against. Do you feel like the Celtics' road to the playoffs so far is going to be damaging to them? Do you think that is going to be a detriment that they haven't, they didn't play a healthy Milwaukee, they didn't play a healthy Philly or a healthy New York? Like, do you think that is actually going to make a difference on Thursday and through the rest of the series?
It's only going to become a detriment to them if they let it become a detriment. And what I mean by that is we've seen them that they've played in these crunch time games. They can't come out. And I'm sure, like I said, they play with their food. There was probably some games, these first few series, where maybe the intensity it was there, but not quite what it should be in a playoff game. They cannot let that happen in this series. I would say maybe that's my concern, that they're going to, like you saw, talked about the Celtics jumping out to an early lead in some of these games. My concern is that maybe it'll go the other way on them. If that happens, it won't be so much because of these other rounds. It'll be because of who they are. Like if that's who they are, then they don't deserve to win the championship. Like, yeah,
I agree. I'm not like, there are reasons to be concerned as a Celtics fan, obviously, like we've talked about that, but that's not one of my concerns. Like I'm not worried like, because they never went through the top teams in the East. And the reason I'm not worried about it is because like we've been here before. We've been to 6 of the last 8 Eastern Conference Finals. Like we have, yes, we don't have Marcus Smart, but we have Drew Holiday, a guy that's actually won a championship. Like this team is battle tested. They know what it takes to win at this point. Like they know what they have to do. So I think any of that is, again, just kind of filler sports talk junk. But here we are. I gotta know. We've danced around it. What is your prediction for how this series plays out?
So, like I said, after Game 2, where the Celtics just squeaked out another one against the Pacers, I just didn't feel great about them. I thought it was like Dallas is going to handle them. I've kind of come back around because a lot of like the mainstream public narrative, and I don't even like doing this because it goes against everything I stand for and kind of who I am as a fan. But I'm going to take the Celtics, and I'm going to take the Celtics in 5 because I do think they are the much better team. And at the end of the day, I think they're going to get the better of Kyrie. I think they're going to, for the most part, shut him down. And I've gotten to the point where I really don't think there's going to be an in-between. I think he's either going to go off and torch us, or they're going to shut him down. And if they shut him down and Porzingis is healthy and effective, I don't think Dallas really has much of a shot in this series. So, yeah, my official prediction is Celtics in 5.
I like it. I like it.
My fans are going to hate me saying that. But, I have to call it as it is.
They demanded RJ to say Mavericks in 5, but here we are. I mean, I think you could be spot on with Kyrie. I think he has been, like, with him being the 1B, like, yes, he's been for the most part fantastic in the playoffs, but like when you are the 1B, like, you get to have that game where like you have 9 points against the Thunder, which he did. He had a couple bad games against the Thunder, and even against the Wolves he had a pretty tough shooting out. And like people aren't on your doorstep with pitchforks because like they're expecting you to deliver every game. Like he doesn't have to do that. So I think it could be night to night with Kyrie, but my official prediction is going to be Celtics in 6. So I do have some real fears with it. It's not even as much with like my team, like and what we think of the Celtics. It's just more about like it's really scary with what Luka is doing right now. Like he is playing on a different level than anyone in a Celtics uniform. That's just the reality of the situation. And when you have two guys that I think have the chance to be the two best closers in the series, one guy that really should be the best closer in the series in Luka, like that gives a team a distinct advantage. I don't think it's going to be enough to upset the Celtics, and especially with all the different guys the Celtics have to throw at them, and I trust the Celtics role players a bit more. So I'm saying Celtics in 6. I'm also saying that because I'm hoping somehow, some way I can get some tickets to see the Celtics close out Game 6 in in Dallas, and I'll have the chance to go. So I'm saying Celtics in 6. That's where I'm leaving off.
Oh, that would be actually awesome to see them clinch. Have you checked what the prices are right now for these finals tickets?
So I did. So for Game 3 and 4, as of right now, I think you're looking at like $1,000 to get in.
Okay.
Just to get in the building.
Too?
And that is before the fees. I don't even know if the fees are like a flat rate or if the fees are like on a scale depending on what like the total purchase price is. Yeah, I don't even know how that shit works. I mean, I don't know, man. We're hoping we can pull some strings so I can make it for game. And I don't even know if they've like. I'm sure some of the Game 6 tickets would be on sale, but obviously since we don't know if that's going to be necessary in the series, like I don't think all the tickets are on sale. So maybe I can swoop in and get Game 6 at some point, bro. But I would love to go.
I think you need to find a guy, somebody that's got a good ticket for you, somebody that can get you in for a little cheaper than that.
Certainly not 2 tickets. Sorry, Jess. I don't know if I'm throwing out.
I think it's
maybe I can justify.
Trip.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. That's gonna be tough, but. Awesome, dude. I mean, I think we basically covered it. I mean, obviously, I'd love to have you back on, depending on how this series plays out. There's going to be a lot more rest in between these games, right? It's not going to be like the Eastern Conference Finals like we were talking about before we started recording. Like, every other night, like the finals is like you're looking at 2-3 nights rest sometimes. So this is going to take a bit. It can go as late as like the end of June. So, we'll definitely bring you back on to get your thoughts. But was there anything else about this series specifically that I missed?
No, so I just wanted to say before we wrap things up that I'm going to be the biggest victor if the Celtics win because they'll have won the first year they traded Marcus Smart away. So if that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. And yes, is it a little toxic of me and maybe shows I'm not the most happy person that I'm still harping on Marcus Smart a year later. But when I have to see videos now on the internet of like, oh, I'm so happy. These are probably 15-year-old kids too, so I shouldn't let 15-year-olds get in my head. But when I have to see a video of like, oh, I'm so happy the Celtics in their finals, but we're missing somebody, and then it cuts to like Marcus Smart. Like, are you people delusional? The reason you're in this spot right now is because he's not here. And I read the comments, and they're like, I just hope they give him a ring. And I'm just like, I've gotten better with not being so negative, but like it just consumes me, and like it brings the worst part of me out. Where I'm like, you people are just so pathetic as fans. Where you're like, this guy won nothing for you, and you act like he's like Ted Williams, or like, it's just, it's not healthy that I care that much, and I'm still talking about this. But yeah, that's the last thing I really had to get off my chest when it comes to potential outcome of the series.
I'm glad we were able to.
That's what you bring me on for, though. That's what you bring me on for, though.
We would have lost our roots if we didn't get you like a couple minutes on Marcus Smart. Glad to know you're still haunted by him as he like rots away on a Grizzlies team after. And honestly, it is pretty crazy, just to go off on a tangent for a second. Like, the offseason moves that the Celtics made, like, obviously it's working out, but, like, just reminding everybody, look at the guys we gave away. Like, I think Brogdon, Rob Williams, and Marcus Smart, and Grant Williams played in a lot of games, but we'll talk about Grant Williams in a second. Those three guys, Brogdon, Smart, and Rob Williams, I don't have the stat in front of me. They had to have combined for like 30 games this year. Like,
no impact.
They literally
no impact anywhere.
They weren't healthy. They all got hurt. Like, and that's like the wear and tear you see on a team that goes to the Eastern Conference Finals so consistently. Like, these dudes are not playing 80 games. They're playing like 100 games a year for several straight years. Like, I do feel bad in some ways that like we sold some damaged goods, but like, God damn it, man. Brad Stevens deserves a fucking ring for what he's done in the front office, man, because those moves are aging magnificently.
So now that you said that, but two things. I haven't been on since Smart got dealt. And I believe it was, especially on the East Coast, was very late. I think it might have been like almost midnight, and I was about to go to bed, and I'm like scrolling through, and I have, Woj's Twitter notifications on, just like I have Adam Scheffner's on, and I got the notification. And I'm telling you, I was visibly shaking. I could not believe it happened. And I didn't sleep for another about hour and a half because I was like, I can't believe they just actually did this. I was like, and then Grant Williams left. But like the Smart one, I was like, I felt like I had been into a fist fight. My adrenaline was through the roof just from sitting in bed, reading that tweet. My heart was going a mile a minute that it happened.
I wasn't in love with Marcus Smart the way some fanboys were, but I definitely felt more fondly of him than you, I must say. But you must have felt like you were in a fist fight for the next several weeks watching all the tribute videos and the goodbyes from all the fanboys after that. Because that must have been tough. Because I kind of knew in my heart, I'm like, dude, this is a great move. Like, we got Kristaps and a draft pick. Like, the ceiling of the team is so much higher, like, as we're seeing, obviously. So anyways, you probably really hated the couple weeks after that. Because it was definitely a love fest for Smart after we gave him up.
So I don't want to jump the gun because the Celtics haven't won anything yet. But you brought up Brad Stevens. If the Celtics win this championship, and this might be a dumb question, but who do you give more credit to this championship? Is it Brad Stevens or is it Danny Ainge? Because at the end of the day, you need big pieces and your cornerstone to win. And he brought in Tatum and Brown, and he also is the one that evaluated Brad Stevens, that he has a great basketball knowledge. But then on the other hand, you have Stevens, who did the job that Danny Ainge couldn't quite finish and put the pieces around these guys. So I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I was curious if you had a little bit of a take on that. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's a fantastic question. I think that's really tough. Like, I think if you want to talk about, it's kind of a cop-out answer. I think if you want to talk about, like, this title specific, like, again, I hate saying this because I'm knocking on wood as we speak, but, like, if we were talking about this year and the success this year, any success this year, you kind of have to say Brad, because he's been in the driver's seat for a while now. Like, he's had the assets, he made the moves that took the Celtics from a good team to, like, again, regardless of how this series played out, we are a much better team this year than what we were last year, 100%. Like, he has given the team all the tools they need to potentially win a title. Like, I will say that much 100%. So I'd say for this season it's Brad Stevens, but if you want to talk about like the total impact of who did what for the Celtics franchise, Ainge is still way ahead, because the moves that he made to get Tatum and Brown are not talked about enough. Like, those drafts, the 2016 and the 2017 draft, like, people thought both of those drafts were like a two-horse race. You know what I mean? I guess more so in the Brown class. Like, there were two top guys above everybody else. It was Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram were like the top tier, and like, we had all that momentum where we could have traded Jaylen Brown potentially for guys like Paul George or Jimmy Butler, and we didn't do any of that shit. And the next year, the craziest, I think that like might be one of the best moves ever. It's probably on the Mount Rushmore of the move for them to trade out of number 1 to go back to 3, passing on Fultz and Lonzo, and still getting easily the best player in the draft and the franchise cornerstone for the next decade plus in Tatum. Like, that was like no moves that Brad done are on that level, and those two guys are the cornerstone of the team. But so that's my answer. It would be Stevens for this year, but like in totality, we're still looking at Ainge, because like that's not talked about enough. That's a great question.
It's just one of those. I don't really think there's a bad answer to the question too, which is another reason I brought it up, because both guys deserve a tremendous amount of credit no matter what happens in this 7-game series.
Well, there is. I have one last question for you that there could be some bad answers to. I'm actually asking you for a very bad answer here, because I have my answer to this question already locked and loaded. So I'm very curious what you have to say. I just want to know, out of curiosity again, I'm a bit removed from Boston sports talk media, just being in the Dallas area. So I just want to know the dumbest thing you've heard about the Celtics on Boston sports talk radio since the playoff run started.
You said you already have something. Is that something that Tony Maserati said?
I don't know.
It was on Felger and Maz. So what was said was that if the Celtics win the championship and the road continues like this, does a championship mean less? So I don't know if that's what you heard.
100%, yes.
I love Felger and Maz, and I think a lot of it, they have great ratings. A lot of it is to antagonize the local fan base, and I think that's a lot of what that is. But yeah, that's probably the dumbest thing I heard, because it's like, so like if the Celtics weren't killing these teams, you would be, killing them for not handling business, which is what's funny about it. But yeah, so I guess we have the same comment. But yeah, that's what I think he said that in the Miami, or maybe it was the Cleveland series. Or it might have been the beginning of the Indiana series, but it was said probably within the last month. But yeah, that's probably the dumbest thing that I heard.
Yeah, I don't know if I actually I heard them dance. They were it was right in the middle of the Cleveland series is when I was in Boston, and so I was actually watching Felger and Maz a bit at Connors, and they were kind of dancing around it, they kind of threw out the question, and then I think I saw one of them actually came out and said that the ring was going to mean less if the road continued the way that it did. But I'm like, first of all, whoever's coming out of this loaded Western Conference is going to be deserving. You're going through Luka, you're going through Anthony Edwards, you're going through Jokic. Those are all super mega stars, and if they made it through the West, then they had every reason to be there. But it's just so fucking stupid, dude. It's you can only control who, you can't control who you play. You just go out there and you give it your best. You do everything you can in the regular season to get the easiest road, and then you get who you get. It's they kind of lose that, and especially with how good the NBA is this year, bro. You can be oh yeah, Dallas is a 5 seed or whatever. Dallas is the best 5 seed that we've seen in a decade. Already. They're that good already. So I can't stand it. So I'm glad we were aligned on that.
Do you know who Jay King is? He writes for The Athletic. He covers the Celtics.
He's a Western Mass guy too.
Did you see his tweet? Legion Hoops, if you know who they are, they're this big.
Yes.
You saw this, you know what I'm talking about. He tweeted something and was I think it's disgusting that these Twitter pages with 1 million followers, and the Legion's Hoop page literally quoted him and said, per Jay King, but he was annoyed with all the views that that the original clip got, which just was funny to me, because Legion Hoops is our buddy Peter Gifford actually bought a signed Jason Tatum ball after his rookie year from Legion Hoops, and I'm telling you, this basketball was so fake, and the autograph was just so forged or stamped on. It was just, every time I hear Legion's Hoops, that's what I think of. And the whoever was running the page didn't get back to Peter for 2 months after Peter paid him the money for the ball too. So hey, kind of a good investment for Peter to buy a signed Jason Tatum ball after his rookie year, even though it was probably completely fake.
Signed in crayon by the Legion Hoops admin team. But I actually thought you were going to tell me, because I remember after Peter ordered that, I thought you were going to tell me he never even got the ball from that page, which would have been even funnier in my opinion. So I'm glad Pete actually got the ball.
Yeah, he fought for it. He finally got it.
I actually, on that argument, it is kind of funny, because I saw that, and Legion Hoop, all the aggregation pages piss me off, NBA Central and Legion Hoops, because I do get it. It is a little petty when they do actually credit you in the thing, but it's we all know what you're doing. You're just taking the work of somebody else and then just putting a little bibliography at the bottom that people aren't even going to remember. They're just responding to the content. So I do kind of see both sides of it. I don't know if that was the best example of him when he actually did get credit for it, but I feel that. So I mean, I think that just about covers it, man. We'll have to bring you back on, RJ.
Yeah, victory celebration, perhaps.
Oh my, we're really jinxing it. Fucking knock on some wood, dude, before we.
I might be doing that on purpose.
Oh man. All right, man. Well, we'll bring you by next week. Thanks again, RJ, for the time. Before I let you guys go,
always having me.
Of course. RJ, where can the people follow you on Twitter, by the way?
I believe I'm just at RJ Rosazza 5. I have not been very active on there as of late, but if I see some followers pump in, I might go back to my old self of just tweeting out negative stuff. But for now, it's been very quiet on there. So I don't think I don't even know the last time I had a tweet on there, but it probably was something negative. But I'm always on Twitter, so if you want to follow me there, go for it. At RJ Rosazza 5.
We'll have the words with Wallace listeners, bring them back. We need to bring back 2016 RJ on Twitter.
Bring back my Twitter presence. I need something to do at night, especially in these summer hours when we're not going to have anything on the watch. So
Exactly. Well, awesome. Before I let you guys go, be sure to also follow at Words with Wallace on everything. Be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss a new episode. And I will actually be back tomorrow with the part 2 of the finals preview with Brian Pope as we kind of cover things from a Mavericks fan perspective. And I will talk to you guys then. Peace.